Hi everyone, it's Deb. I'm at the Pine Grove United Church Cemetery, just south of Cornhill, New Brunswick, getting close to Sussex, in between Salisbury and Sussex. And stopped here because I've driven by this cemetery a number of times. Looks like it's a relatively newer cemetery, but we finally got a chance on this lovely sunny day in October to take a stop and look at the lovely changing of the colors of the leaves, and also to explore the cemetery. I'll be doing a little bit more research shortly to add to this video, but hoping that you'll enjoy some of the headstones and the information and the people who live in this very unique and lovely part of New Brunswick. Thanks for watching. Before there were roads, churches, or cemeteries, there was forest. Cornhill, New Brunswick was originally known as the Ridge and later Corn Ridge, before becoming Cornhill in the late 1800s. The community was settled primarily by immigrants from the United Kingdom in the early to mid 1800s. Originally known as the Ridge, the community later became known as Corn Ridge and eventually Cornhill. The settlers quickly discovered that the soil here was unusually fertile. Farms prospered, cheese factories opened, maple sugar operations, grist mills, blacksmith shops, and dairy farms transformed Cornhill into one of the wealthiest farming communities in the region. But prosperity came with hardship. Disease spread easily in isolated rural communities. Medical care was primitive. Children often died young, and cemeteries like Pine Grove became sacred places where entire families and their histories were preserved in stone. Additional feature as we're walking through to leave, there's the Melvin family, and they seem to be in these markers near the front of the middle section. But what became interesting was that the pictographs on the markers were telling the stories. So Melvin was perhaps a golfer, and Doris liked to knit, and Cole have a country scene, deer by the water and the lake. And then over here we have Dwayne Paul Elliott. Looks like 74 to 94. His marker looks like the tail end of a plane. I wonder if that tells a story. Frank Rouse has a pictogram of a welder. In the back, the Rogers, there's a violin or a fiddle, so perhaps a musician. The Heatherings have a marker of a covered bridge, which is absolutely typical of New Brunswick. And one of the things that we did notice is that there's so many markers here that have pictographs of dogs and other animals. So very interesting and unique. Quiet place, great weather day. And we'll finish off with the first marker I saw when I came in, which is from the Vey family, Sharon Muriel Vey, who died in 2007, but had this on the bench of their marker. Cemeteries like Pine Grove are more than burial grounds. They are historical records carved into stone. They preserve the memory of the families who cleared these forests, built these farms, and shaped rural New Brunswick. Long after the voices are gone, the stories remain, waiting to be remembered. Well, thanks for joining me on my journey to the Pine Grove Cemetery in Cornhill. I thought what I would do is just record some of the literature that I've got off of the internet, some free information that I thought might be helpful for you to understand what it was like to live in this area during the mid-1800s, when people were immigrating and settling this land, primarily from the United Kingdom. And so life in this area was And, it was hardly settled at all. It was primarily forest, and New Brunswick is still known for its forest areas. But it must have been a really difficult time, for people to come over who didn't have the ability to use the equipment and the mechanization that we have today. And so, people were resilient and residents were resilient, and it was a tough life. They had to clear dense wilderness, and they had to cultivate crops, and they had to, open up sawmills and have all of the grist mills, and they had to create what they needed to have the tools to be able to survive, right? In the mid-19th century, survival required immense physical labor. The early settlers faced monumental tasks, of felling old growth forests to establish pastures. It's really common in this area here when we look at the Acadian history of how they built a massive system of dikes to be able to control the waterways to increase their farmland. Crops were initially planted directly among the remaining stumps and before the soil could be fully turned. By the 1880s, this region boasted high productive yields. But in the mid-1800s, families grew primarily subsistence crops like hay and wheat, oats and potatoes and turnips. Can you imagine just eating that, for the majority of your diet? Housing and daily life, well, homesteads were self-sufficient. And it's interesting, when we think about how there is a little bit of a movement for people to get back to homesteading or some form of homesteading, that we want to rely back on the land and not just rely on the systems that we've built over the last few hundred years. Women carded and spun and wove wool into durable homespun clothing. And I have family who are textile artists, and textiles have always been and have always played a part in my life. And so, going to museums and taking your kids to go to museums to see how people lived hundreds of years ago is so important, so that they understand, where the clothing came from and that it just didn't come from a particular box or a particular shipping company. Families raised their livestock for food, and they sheared sheep for textiles. The meals were cooked over open hearths and heavy wood stoves. And because imported food was really scarce and very expensive, diets relied heavily on garden vegetables and home-cured meats and food gathered from nearby forests. In our area, we're lucky that we live by the water, so fishery was an important area as well. When we look at community and how people helped each other out, there was no electricity or paved road or modern conveniences back then. Life was inherently slower paced and centered around the community and the interdependence on community members. Gatherings revolved around changing seasons or church events or mutual cooperation for tasks like barn raisings and autumn harvests. To experience a realistic and immersive recreation of 19th century rural life in the province, there are places like King's Landing, who I have taken my family and friends to visit, because it's a prominent historical attraction located in the region. Its authenticity is there. It's a wonderful place to bring your family, especially over the summer months as a tourism, and I would highly recommend you looking at King's Landing as one of the areas to be able to feel and understand what it was to live in this area during that time period. I hope that you really enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoyed the ability to look into the past and reflect on some of the areas that early Maritimes can boast. And I hope that as I build my page that you'll be able to like and subscribe and send me comments and suggestions on things that you'd like to see or learn about. I'm happy to do that. Thanks so very much for watching The Traveling Tea Cake Rider. Have a great day. Bye-bye.